Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. Just a warning, my allergies are killing me right now. It's what put me down yesterday, so if I sound a little off today, that's why. But there are some exciting developments taking place that I want to talk about. Heading to the Texas Motor Carrier website, looking at Tesla's Robotaxi business, we now have 59 VINs listed, which is up from just over 40, and that was only about 2 weeks ago. And yes, they're still currently all Model Ys. This does not mean that all 59 vehicles are currently active in the fleet, nor does it indicate that 59 of them are unsupervised, but theoretically that's how many Tesla could deploy if it chose to right now. And of course they wouldn't submit for more vehicles if they didn't have plans on launching those vehicles in the service soon. There is now one complaint listed against Tesla, but the status is closed, no jurisdiction. I looked for more information about that complaint, but nothing is public yet. But I did submit a Public Information Act request, so I'll let you guys know if I hear back. S.E. Robinson shared this flyover of the Houston lot in Texas this week. And from this angle, I counted 21 Cybercabs, but there are plenty of Model Ys seemingly getting ready to be deployed. And as I've been saying, until we see a Cybercab on site without a steering wheel and without pedals, I think we should keep our expectations low for Cybercab deployment. And this video was shared of the lot in Dallas. And just from this one angle, you can now see dozens of Cybercabs lined up in that lot. And as we know, the Cybercab has now been spotted testing in around 20 different US states. And I saw Spencer share this document. It was dated April 24th earlier this year, but it's Tesla's first responder interaction plan for Arizona. And the filing says the design domain of the Robotaxi service may include the following areas while operating at SAE Level 4 autonomy: Chandler, Gilbert, Glendale, Maricopa County, Mesa, Paradise Valley, Phoenix, Scottsdale, and Tempe. It's a little odd they would list the cities like this, but all of these cities are actually inside of Maricopa County. So if we just zoom out for Maricopa, that has a population of about 4.8 million people. And just to show you on a map, the red outline is Maricopa County. And zooming in a bit, you will find Chandler, Gilbert, Mesa, Scottsdale, Glendale, and so on. Fun fact, I actually lived in Chandler, Arizona for 1 year after graduating from Penn State for my Edward Jones training. And I'm not going to get into it today, but on Tesla's website, you can actually find Tesla's first responder plans. So I'll have this blog post linked below if you want to check it out. And looking at the Robotaxi tracker, the only city in Arizona Tesla has officially called out is Phoenix. So I would expect the first launch in Arizona to be there with hopefully quick expansion thereafter. But we are now down to 20 days for Tesla to launch in 5 different cities to hit the timelines it put in its slide deck from Q1. So I think most of us would agree that timeline is not looking very good right now. Shifting to supervised FSD, Tesla said in the last 2 months, it's been over 3 times safer than manual driving on Dutch roads, with 3.5 times fewer collisions on Netherlands public roads. And some data that I'll have to admit would be tough to quantify. They said nearly 15 times fewer automatic emergency braking events, 8.8 times less harsh acceleration, 7.3 times less harsh braking, and 8 times fewer hard swerves. And zooming in on the fine print, Tesla says 3.4 times safer on the highway, where FSD has done 16.6 million kilometers and 0 collisions. And they then give a comparison with manual driving with active safety features. And they also say it's 1.6 times safer on non-highway roads, where FSD has done 7 million kilometers and there's been 3 collisions. So that would imply that FSD has now done 23.6 million kilometers in the Netherlands from April 10th to June 5th. And if it's anything like Tesla's FSD performance in the States, those 3 collisions on non-highway roads are likely low speed parking lot type behaviors. But numbers aside, as Elon said today, FSD supervised has now been officially approved in Denmark, and the rollout will begin soon. As Ashok said, that's now the Netherlands, Lithuania, Estonia, and Denmark where supervised FSD has officially been approved. And across these 4 countries, that's roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of about 215,000 Teslas active on the roads. And yes, that would be a cumulative figure, with of course the majority of those vehicles being in the Netherlands and Denmark. And of course from there you'd have to filter out AI4 and Hardware 3, but as we know, each new country with approval will start the butts in seats ripple effect. There will come a time when we need to have some conversations about quantum computing. And anytime you hear about a leap in the technology, what it's actually threatening is the encryption that protects nearly everything you do online. But thankfully, Surfshark, the sponsor of this video, just launched something built specifically for that problem. It's called Dowsos, and it's Surfshark's first proprietary VPN protocol. Almost every VPN on the market runs on protocols like WireGuard or OpenVPN, which were originally built for enterprise use and then were adapted for consumers. They route everyone connected to a server through one shared tunnel. But Dowsos was built from scratch for individual users, so it assigns a dedicated encrypted tunnel to each session instead of putting you in the shared pool. It's also post-quantum secure, meaning it uses the new encryption standards designed to hold up against quantum computers that could eventually break today's encryption. Surfshark says it's up to 30% faster than the current industry standard protocols, and it was independently audited by Cure 53 with no critical or high severity issues found. And if any of you are power users, Surfshark's bypasser feature lets you split tunnel, so you can pick exactly which apps or sites route through the VPN and which don't. And as we can expect from Surfshark, all of this runs on one account across an unlimited number of devices for your whole family. So if you'd like to support the work I do here, you can go to surfshark.com/electrified or use code electrified at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. And the agenda for the upcoming June 30th meeting of the Technical Committee of Motor Vehicles, TCMV, where we're waiting for that broader EU-wide vote on supervised FSD. Unfortunately, all you'll find on the minutes is a continuation of discussions of the request of the Netherlands for that Act 39 authorization, and that's set to last for 50 minutes. But there is no mention whatsoever of a vote. So, could there be a surprise vote at the end? I suppose it's possible, but I think the proper expectation should be that there will be no vote at the meeting on June 30th. And frankly, I think the chances of a surprise vote are really near zero. There would have to be an act that was drafted and given to these countries usually 2 weeks ahead of time, so they have something official to actually vote on, and there's absolutely zero mention of that. Which means the next window for a possible block-wide vote would not be until October this year at the next meeting. So unfortunately, right now, it's looking like the only path to approval for supervised FSD will be country by country. Any type of EU-wide broader approval is now likely going to wait until sometime closer to Q4 this year, and that's just for the vote, meaning the actual rollout of the software might now be pushed into early 2027. And importantly, from an outlet in Denmark, they said the approval of supervised FSD is provisional and only applies to the EU countries that choose to recognize the Dutch approval, which now includes Denmark. But if the system is to be finally approved for use throughout the EU, it requires approval from the EU Commission. If that happens, the approval will become a common EU type approval, which is automatically valid in all member states. If, however, the EU Commission rejects the system, the Dutch provisional approval will become invalid after 6 months. This will also mean the Danish approval will lapse. Supervised FSD may no longer be marketed or sold in EU countries. So yes, if the vote eventually fails and the EU decides to formally reject supervised FSD, that means the provisional approvals that we have in the 4 countries we've been talking about so far would all lose that approval, and it would lapse 6 months after that refusal. But of course, with each new country that recognizes the Dutch approval, it would make a failed vote and a formal rejection that much more disruptive for the countries that already have it approved. And there is a world where the EU keeps kicking the can down the road and an official vote is delayed, meaning the patchwork of country by country continues indefinitely. The US Trade Representative Jameson Greer is scheduled to visit Tesla's Fremont factory this week. This as part of the manufacturing tour built to promote the Trump administration's push to bring production back to the US. The lineup spans the sectors the administration has placed at the center of its reindustrialization message: EVs and automotive, flexible electronics, drones, and semiconductors. Now separately, don't forget, March of last year, as the administration rolled out new tariffs, Tesla submitted a formal public letter to Jameson Greer as part of the trade office's review of unfair trade practices and non-reciprocal arrangements. In the letter, Tesla warned that US exporters like itself are inherently exposed to retaliation retaliatory tariffs imposed by other countries in response to U.S. actions. Tesla said it supported fair trade, but urged the office to weigh the downstream effects on American exporters and the limits of the domestic supply chain. At the time, Tesla said certain lithium battery components, the company noted, remain difficult or impossible to source entirely within the U.S. despite its onshoring efforts. Tesla said trade actions should not and need not conflict with the goal of expanding domestic manufacturing. So I'm sure Tesla will continue to plead its case a bit further this week when Jameson visits. Tesla has posted a new job listing for a business development manager for the Tesla Semi based in Parsdorf, just outside Munich, Germany. It's a B2B sales job and involves lining up fleet customers, configuring the trucks and their charging, and expanding Tesla Semi's customer base in the region. The hire is a clear sign Tesla is laying the commercial groundwork for the Tesla Semi in Europe, starting in Germany. But just to set proper expectations, we still likely will not see the Tesla Semi actually deployed or sold in Europe until 2027 at the earliest. And just in case you missed it, Edmunds, of all companies, said Tesla's Model 3 rear-wheel drive is the efficiency champ in our real-world range test. The vehicle did more than beat its EPA range estimate in their test. It also became the most efficient EV we've tested that's currently in production. It has an EPA range estimate of 363 miles, but the car they tested went 393 miles on a full charge, 30 miles further than the official figure, or an 8.3% outperformance. They said the more impressive figure is how little energy it used to get there. The EPA rates the Model 3 rear-wheel drive at 25 kilowatt hours per 100 miles, or 4 miles per kilowatt hour. In their testing, it returned 21.7 kilowatt hours per 100 miles, or 4.61 miles per kilowatt hour, making it 13.2% more efficient than its EPA estimate. And they said the Model 3 RWD is an unusually efficient EV that's also nice to drive and easy to live with on a daily basis. Tesla North America said a Tesla is twice as likely to reach 250,000 miles as a Subaru. No engine, no oil changes, no timing chains, no fuel injectors, and far fewer moving parts overall. But just so you know, this data is coming from an IC Cars study. It covered 174 million vehicles, and Toyota sits at the top with a 17.8% chance of reaching 250,000 miles. Lexus followed at 12.8%, while Honda and Acura rounded out the top four. They were the only four manufacturers to beat the overall industry average of 4.8%. But Tesla, in an impressive 6th place, ranks alongside GMC with a 4.6% chance of reaching 250,000 miles, which puts Tesla ahead of brands like Cadillac, Mazda, Subaru, Volvo, Mercedes, BMW, and Porsche. And filtering down to only the luxury brands, Tesla came in third behind only Lexus and Acura. And a fun fact, the luxury average chance of hitting 250,000 miles was 3.2%. And again, Tesla came in at 4.6%. There were two new SpaceX interviews over the last 24 hours, one with Elon and the other with Gavin Baker and the CFO of SpaceX. They were both largely general in nature, but I will have them linked below. And since my voice is running out of juice for today, I just want to cover SpaceX's new AI1 satellite. But not just the numbers that they're predicting for this prototype version, but I want to try to contextualize what those numbers would actually mean. And ultimately to give us all a sense of how overly ambitious Elon is really being here, because we know he is, it's just a question of how much. So if you missed it, here's an image of the AI1 satellite. You have the radiators here in the middle. On a knife's edge to the sun, you'd have the actual compute right here, very small in the middle, and then you have the massive solar arrays on either side. All the way across, this device in space would be 70 meters or roughly 75 yards, so about 3/4 of a football field. And the height would be 20 meters tall, once again roughly 20 yards. But I wanted to compare this AI1 orbital satellite versus Colossus. And SpaceX is targeting 1 gigawatt of orbital AI compute annualized by the end of next year. Not that they'll have 1 gigawatt deployed by the end of next year, because that's definitely not going to happen, just an annualized rate by the time 2027 ends. But frankly, I think even that is overly optimistic. So Colossus 1, let's just say it's 500 megawatts. And some articles out there will say that Colossus 1 is 300 megawatts, but I wanted to run the math at 500 just to keep things simple, and also because it's cleanly half of what Elon is projecting by the end of next year. One of these AI1 orbital satellites, as SpaceX just debuted, is 150 kilowatts at peak power, which is equivalent to 0.15 megawatts. So if you take the power draw of Colossus 1 at 500 megawatts and divide that by 0.15 megawatts, again, the peak power of each AI1 satellite, that would require 3,333 satellites in orbit. That, of course, to match the power of Colossus 1, which again is using the peak figures. Or we could use the sustained or the average power SpaceX shared, which is 120 kilowatts. So that would be 500 megawatts divided by 0.12 megawatts, which would require 4,000 satellites, again using the average or sustained figures. So it would take somewhere between 3,300 and 4,000 of these AI1 satellites to match the power figures of Colossus 1, assuming it's currently at 500 megawatts. We were also told the AI1 orbital satellite will be 70 kilowatts per ton, which tells us that each satellite is going to weigh in the neighborhood of 2 tons, which is roughly 4,400 pounds, or roughly the equivalent of a Model Y. Now, in time, this is a projection. SpaceX is saying Starship V3 can carry around 100 tons per trip, which would mean it can take about 50 of these AI1 satellites per launch. So, to match a 500 megawatt data center using the lower range 3,333 AI satellites, you would take that number of satellites times 2 tons each to get 6,666 tons, which again is that peak figure. Then you would take that number of tons divided by 100 tons per launch on Starship V3, meaning you would need 67 Starship launches to get those over 3,300 satellites into orbit and to match a 500 megawatt data center. Then running the math using the average or sustained power figures, and I did just clean up the math here, so it would actually be 83 Starship launches. Now, some things to consider. SpaceX is currently building out the factory that's going to build out all of this satellite hardware. So number one, how long is it going to take for those factories to be built out? And then two, how many satellites will they be able to produce each day? Questions we just cannot answer right now. To date, the Starship launch cadence, it launched 5 times for all of 2025 and 1 time so far this year. Of course, the reason the number this year is lower is because of all of the upgrades for V3. But zooming out, Starship has flown 12 times in 3 years, and remember, it has not yet reached orbit. To date, most of these Starship launches have carried a minimal payload. The max payload on a launch was launch number 12, where it took 45 tons. And where I'm getting that 45 tons for launch 12 was they had 22 of these simulated Starlink units. So at roughly 2 tons each, that's where that comes from. And so far, only 2 Starlink V3 satellites have actually launched, but it was really just to take photos of the heat shield, and that happened on flight 12. And an important technical note, these were actually Starlink V2s that were just modified to simulate what the V3 hardware will be like. So the number of Starlink V3 satellites that are actually operating for Starlink service is still currently 0. And Nick Patane put this image together just to show the comparison of this AI1 satellite and the size of how it would stack up next to a Starlink V3. So yes, AI1 is slightly bigger, but not totally out of the realm compared to a Starlink V3. And remember, all of these calculations are for a 500 megawatt data center. So to double that, Starship would have to launch somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 times if it wants to hit that annualized rate of 1 gigawatt per year. Said another way, that's over 12 launches every month. So ask yourself, do you think Starship will be doing that by December next year? Sure, a lot can happen between now and then, but at this point, it still feels overly optimistic. I did have some other things I wanted to cover today, but my voice is just not going to allow it. So Tesla stock closed the day at $396.68, down 3%, while the NDX was down 1.5%. The volume was 14% above the average. Thank you all for bearing with me today. Hopefully I'm feeling better by tomorrow. Don't forget, check out Surfshark linked below for anybody interested. Thank you as always. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.